Welcome back to Profitalks. My name is Roland Knall, and today we are continuing our series with Mike Pennacchi. We have covered in the previous episodes taps versus spam ports, explored on network aggregation, and today we're jumping into the topic of seamless integration of visibility solutions and observability solutions for your network. Mike, great to have you back.
Great to be back, Roland. I love doing these talks with you.
Yeah, it seems to me we are starting a little bit of an interesting series here. It's on the one hand, it's obviously very deep end topic, but we think we managed quite well to keep it on a level that is easily understandable and digestible for this kind of information, right?
Oh, exactly. And, it's funny because it's one of those topics that like so many things, you don't really think about until there's a problem. And then everybody wants to know, why weren't you monitoring everything? Why can't you see this? And there's just always this expectation that we're constantly looking at all the network traffic. And if there's an issue, we can instantly figure out what's going on. And so the expectations there, I don't think in reality, a lot of times everyone's prepared to come back and be able to get an answer immediately for problems that occur.
Yeah, I mean, it's the expectation game, right? When you do network analysis specifically, but also network engineering, it's this expectation game that there you have your expert. You don't need to understand what he does, but he will sure understand everything you expect from him. Yes. And at the same time, I had a problem 3 weeks ago. Yes, I ordered this box yesterday, but why doesn't it show my problem from 3 weeks ago?
Yes.
Is it a more sarcastic laugh, or is it more laughing from experience?
No, it's very much from experience. and I think that not only is it a part of understanding all the tools. I mean, you've got your SharkFest shirt on. Anybody that's opened Wireshark, it's all of a sudden, you expect that they're going to be able to just capture a few packets and figure out exactly what the problem is. And it's really this combination of not only understanding the tools that we're using, but understanding the business. What are the goals of the business? And how do we make sure that whatever we're doing most closely aligns with that? And, I started out my career working for the Kenworth Truck Company here in Seattle. And, what I found was that a lot of people that were writing the software had a very rudimentary understanding of how a truck was built. And I'd moved from the IT department over to the plant. I was an IT land administrator over there. And that was my responsibility. I was highly encouraged to go out and walk the line and understand how trucks were built so that we could best ensure our systems were accomplishing that. Because in the end, that's all that mattered. Those trucks had to roll out the back door, and nothing else mattered beyond that point.
Yeah, it's a little bit the same when we are talking a lot about business strategy today in the sense of network visibility. But I have the same thing with software development, right? You need to understand your user base. You need to understand the environment you operate in. And oftentimes you are in your own particular mindset of, oh, this is the ideal switch for that, and this is the ideal network connection for that, and I need those many meters of whatever. But you're not thinking about, what do the users need in that scenario? Right. Where will the machines be? Are there machines that might interfere with what I'm planning and stuff like that? So yeah, that's from an, I would say, external point of view to the network and to the engineering part. Today, we want to focus a little bit on the internal view of what's going on in the network itself. And, I find it interesting about this topic that a lot of organizations struggle with integration, right? We see those downstream effects, and you mentioned Wireshark. People get thrown information at them. There is a problem X. Fix it.
Yes. And then where is the issue? We were just looking at some trace files yesterday where a file transfer failed, and we saw that it was a reset sent by the server. Now, what was really interesting was that the server sent a reset to the client, and the client kept sending data. So what that tells me is that the client never saw that reset. And so, in this case, there was a analyzer, actually an IOTA set up in front of the device that was sending the traffic. The problem was that some filters had been applied to it, and it filtered out that traffic we were interested in looking at. So, it's getting that visibility, making sure that we can see everything at that exact moment and when a problem does occur.
Yeah. So how would you say, when you take a step back a little bit from what is the IT perspective to network visibility, what would you say is a business imperative to think about why network visibility matters, why there is a requirement, why this is a hard selling point on network engineering part?
Well, I think, from the standpoint of things like a UPS. Now, when we put in backup power, we would hope that we never lose power. But when we do, it could be while I'm doing, a podcast like this, or that I'm teaching a class. And so it's critical that we don't go down. And we look at oftentimes things like making sure we have redundant power. And we even take a look at looking at things like how do we have redundant internet connections and so on. But when we do have a security breach, when we do have something go wrong data-wise, too often we're looking back and saying, why didn't we have the right visibility integrated into the system that we have so that we do have that? And then part of the issue becomes we have a system that is not operating properly. And now to get that visibility, we have to start breaking links. We have to start putting taps in and things like that. And I'm resistant to making changes to the system during an outage or when we have problems. So I don't want to change anything. I want to be able to see how it is now and then, what went wrong. So we don't want that visibility to be something that's a hindsight that we go, oh man, I wish I would have had that in. I wish I would have been capturing at the time that problem occurred. I want to be able to go back, see that traffic, see what happened, and be able to identify that and not have to say, well, we're going to have to wait till the next time for that to happen.
So the critical point here is reliability, right? The integration can cause more issues than it actually solves. So what would be an idea to mitigate that? Is there components available to mitigate that right from the start?
Well, one of the things we've talked about taps and aggregation in some of the previous sessions. And so, one of the things that I've found over the years is it's hard to take a network down. If I came in, one of the projects I was working on, I think I may have mentioned it before, it took 6 months to get approvals.
Just to clarify, from an approval point of view, from a user does something stupid point of view, it's very easy to do.
Yeah. Yes. So when we do take that network down, we want to make the most of that. And we want to be able to put in those things that are most disruptive. And I think that's another important thing is that, one of the things that we always need to remember when it comes to network monitoring and troubleshooting is we don't ever want to do anything that creates a failure point. And certainly anything can fail. But when we start looking at things like taps that, fail into pass-through mode, or that, as we move, most things we're tapping now are fiber, it's a passive device. We're splitting the light. So we don't want to put anything in there that would ever cause a failure where somebody could come back to us and say, hey, that thing that you put in is what took the network down. If that happens, then I've failed in my most important mission in troubleshooting. That's not creating any more problems than there already are. So let's do the most disruptive things when we have that opportunity to do those, and then start building on, layering on that monitoring infrastructure from that point on. And also, it's really important to me that our monitoring infrastructure isn't so tightly tied to our network infrastructure that every time we change that network infrastructure, we have to change that monitoring infrastructure. We want to avoid that situation too.
So you're creating, you're giving parts of the network a first aid course in the hope that they never need it, but if they need it, they can build upon that to save the rest of the network.
Yes. Yep. I see that there are really three important functions that we find when it comes to the network monitoring. And that is, we have security, and it's important that we be able to monitor the network and make sure it's secure. We have troubleshooting. Something goes wrong, we need to be able to troubleshoot it. And we have performance analysis. And a lot of times we look at our monitoring infrastructure as something that's only used when there's a problem. But if we're taking full advantage of that monitoring infrastructure, then we can go in and we can use that as a way to take a look at what our network performance is, and on a continual basis work to improve that network performance. And the problem is those three groups oftentimes work independently. So they are each looking at their own infrastructures, their own processes and things like that, when in reality, they could all be working together to come up with one structure that collects that data and then distributes that in a secure manner to everyone that needs that data to get their job done.
Another thing, switching gears here a little bit, another thing in regard to network observability that is often overlooked, I think, is how to determine which equipment to buy, right? Let me give you an example of that. I used to work for a company. When they hired me, there were about 1,200 people working there. When I left 10 years later, it was 3,500. And the company IT department moved from 3 people when I got hired to 36. So this 3-guy network operations team moved from, well, I have a few Windows laptops that I need to administer, to I am running a full-fledged network operations center worldwide. And one of the most impressive parts of that was not so much at how unintrusive it felt as they went on the daily business. The most impressive part is when you were walking into the IT department, the first thing you saw were 2 big TV screens which constantly showed the status of the network. And the only reason they did that, and the only reason that was doable in the first place, was API access. They had this hard requirement to select only utilities with API access. Now, what would you say, first off, to somebody who says that's not really a requirement in my case? And second, yes, okay, the access is fine, but I don't have anyone who can use it.
So I guess what I find, and even with the software I use for helping people register for classes I do and so on, I am constantly sending feature requests to those companies of additional API access I want. Today's world is about automation. It's about how do we do more with less? And a big part of that is API access. And I want to be able to take information from one device and use that to affect a change on another device. And I need that to happen when I'm not there. And so I think that the idea that we can get in and even start a capture, change something, do something, move where a monitor port is through an API is critical, because we need to be able to integrate that in with our other tools. So we can say that if this happens, go do this. And what that does is that helps ensure that as staffing changes, things still operate the same. And that's another part that we run into when people start doing things like building their own tools, or they say, well, why would I want to do that? I could do that with 12 command line settings within this application. Well, that's great, but what happens when you leave? And so I think that that's another part of the network monitoring and visibility infrastructure is to make sure that we have something that we can train somebody on that could be operated by anyone that comes in. So we have to be able to give them that ability to do it. So by having an API, we can develop processes that do those steps and do them reliably.
I'm not to brush our own shoulders in this regard, but this is one thing I really like about the IOTA product, because I mean, obviously, I think about many of our products being done very, very right. Otherwise, I wouldn't be working for this company. But at the same time, one of the practices Profitap applies to IOTA is that everything they do in the dashboard, they do this through the same API that the user can access and use it himself. I like the fact that we have this dashboard, we have this ability for people who are not that deep into understanding network analysis to get a certain level of what's going on, but at the same time offer the possibility to go as deep as you need to be for those people who really understand what they're doing.
Well, sometimes it's really simple in that one of the little tricks that I use for helping identify when a problem occurs is I put an icon on someone's desktop and send a ping. And so recently I was testing that out on one of my IOTAs, and I put in that I want to filter on this IP address, the destination of the ping, and ICMP. And then I just went in and saved that as a separate dashboard. Now, this wasn't any coding. This wasn't anything complicated. Basically, it was just taking the overview dashboard and saving it with a filter predefined in there. And that's the kind of thing that not only does it allow us to do things more quickly, but just like creating our filter buttons within Wireshark, it allows us to begin developing processes where I can ask somebody, hey, did you run this particular filter? Did you do this? And I can start building tools that will help me get through that troubleshooting workflow more quickly.
Yeah, I have to say I went wild with that idea when I heard you first talk about it, because it's so simple yet so effective. You don't need any training for the end users to be able to notify you of something going wrong. And at the same time, it gives you the precise point in time when you need to look at the trace. Depending on the fact that you do the trace all the time and you do it at the right place, there are a few questions you have to answer yourself, but it no longer relies on the user. It relies on you and your preparational steps to get there. That's what I like about this solution. And it goes back to the point of network visibility. Instead of going 15 rounds with the user to understand the problem, we give him tools in hand that allow him to give us the information we need to build a solution for us to find the problem.
Yes. And so through this whole talk, I mean, we've been talking about that integration, visibility. How do we integrate that in there? Anytime we're doing a network design or a revamp, this idea of going in and saying, do we have visibility? And if we don't, where do we need it? And how do we get it there? It just becomes such an important piece. And that's, I think we kind of see how that, what we've talked about in the other talks really tie together with that. And, in this one, we've just bumped it up a level in focusing more on how does that tie in with the business and bring these different operational groups together.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I try to emphasize when talking to people in modern network engineering is that the understanding level goes both ways, right? On one hand, you have to increase the level of visibility, but at the same time, you have also the possibility to reduce the translation efforts between your area and the ones above. There's a lot of things you learn when you go on installations, right? I found myself at an installation where I got an email every second day. I found a cabinet. I found another cabinet, and I found another cabinet. I was sitting at the office and thinking, how the heck did they build this place that he's still finding cabinets? When I went there, I understood, because what he actually meant was he found the equipment on the floor. They haven't built the real cabinet. They just put it there under a tarp, functioning, but not, installed. And so he had to walk through and didn't find the cabinets expected where they are. And he forgot to lift up the tarp. But that's the thing. If he would have sent me one picture, I would have understood the whole issue.
Yep.
And so from a best practice point of view, I would say harden your network for maintenance issues, so don't have to take down the whole thing when you just have to, let's say, monitor, maintain, exchange your IDS solution or update it or whatever it's going on there. IDS just as an example. There are plenty of other applications and appliances. Any other final thoughts you would say on this subject?
I think that, we need to not only have these systems in place for when there's a problem, but I think that, one of the big things is understanding how the systems work. And so by having this visibility in place, by having it tightly integrated into the systems, this gives us a way that we can go in and better understand how the systems are being used. And that understanding helps us troubleshoot, analyze, better performance, better security over time. And so, as with anything, we would hope that by having the right equipment in the right places, it's going to reduce the amount of downtime. We can spend that time looking at how things work. And I know people, we talk about preventative maintenance and looking at things in advance. People say, I don't have any time for that. But like so many things in life, if you don't do it preventatively, you will be forced to take that time later on. And so we need to plan ahead, and network visibility is something that just keeps getting pushed off. And it's something that needs to be pushed toward the beginning. And that happens in the design process, happens when we're starting to build the network, or when we're redoing things is a great time to take advantage of that.
In my previous company, we used to say you can either invest an hour now or 10 hours down the line, but you're going to invest the time. Doesn't matter what.
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you, Mike. It was really cool sharing this with you. It's always very, very much fun to talk to you about those things. Thank you for joining us on this episode. And let's wrap it up. See you next time.
All right. We'll see you next time, Roland.